You're about to join Don Neuen, co-host of Cowboy Logic Radio, and Denise Simon, host of the Denise Simon Experience, for a weekly situation report, or SITREP. 18 hours a day, Denise Simon lives her life as an Intel Analyst. 18 hours a day, Don Neuen lives his life in the world of rock and roll. 1 hour each day, Neuen receives a daily SITREP from Simon. Welcome to the Drive Time Situation Report. Fasten your seatbelt. You're now in Don Neuen's car, and he is calling in for his SITREP.
Hello.
What's up, Denise Simon? It's your buddy Don.
Yes, it is. How you doing?
Well, I'm doing good. And let's first of all welcome everybody to tonight's Drive Time SITREP, which is not really taking place at night. It's taking place, and you'll timestamp it, but about 4 o'clock Eastern time on Tuesday. And I'm not in my personal vehicle driving home from a long, grueling day of work. I'm actually in a rock and roll bus headed east on I-20. I'm thinking that I'm someplace in the middle of Louisiana. At some point, well, I just saw a mile marker 128 go by me, headed eastbound. I think I'm still in Louisiana. But we are headed back, Denise, from Dallas, Texas. We're driving straight from Dallas, Texas to Atlanta after spending the weekend with the Carry the Load folks in Dallas, Texas for their enormous Memorial Day event that they have every year. And this is something I think you would really enjoy being at. It's phenomenal, Denise.
That is an annual thing, correct?
Correct. And for those listeners that aren't familiar with what I'm talking about, go to carrytheload.org. CARRYTHELOAD.org. Now, I think they are in their 9th year. We are in our 7th year of partnering up with them. And what goes on is during the month of Memorial May, there are walking relays that are carrying the American flag. The East Coast walking relay starts in Boston, Mass. The West Coast walking relay starts in Seattle, Washington. And the Midwest relay, which is the bus that we're on right now, Denise, started in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And basically what happens is over the month of May, it's a relay where they walk the American flag, each one of those various tour legs, that culminates, all 3 tour legs meet up in Dallas, Texas. They met this year on Sunday. And it's phenomenal, Denise. They raise money for the families of fallen military, police, fire, first responders. That's what the whole thing's about. Mm-hmm. And the head count at Reverchon Park in Dallas, Texas, where this all culminates, they're estimating this year was between 30 and 35,000 people.
Excellent.
Yeah. And the other neat thing about this organization, and Denise, I know you're going to appreciate this because you've probably researched organizations like this. And with a lot of nonprofit organizations, ladies and gentlemen, many of you know that the funding doesn't always reach the recipient, or the donations don't always reach the recipient, or out of $1, maybe a few cents does. Well, Carry the Load, Denise, 93%, 93 cents on every dollar goes to the recipients. 7% covers all of the operating expenses. It's huge. It's really huge. So at any rate, at some time during this show, Denise, we'll pop up and we'll ask Tom Butcher, who's a Marine veteran who's driving this rock and roll bus right now. He's one of our elite drivers that did this Carry the Load Midwest tour. We'll pop up and ask old Tom exactly where we are. But until then, why don't you why don't you timestamp the show? And in the great stellar words of Chris Cuomo, who plagiarizes me, let's get after it. Oh,
It is.
And Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you, Denise.
Yeah, okay. Good boy. Merry Christmas.
All right.
It is 4:05 p.m. Eastern on the 28th day of May in the year of our Lord 2019.
Thank you very much. All right. So what are we going to talk about? What would you like to talk about that happened maybe since the big news where Trump has basically instructed AG Barr to declassify a boatload of stuff? Or maybe you want to talk about his trip over to Japan. What do you want to talk about?
Well, let's clarify the first one on declassification. What Trump did was sign a proclamation or a declaration, whatever it was, giving AG Barr the authorization to work with all agencies as required to obtain documents, review them, and determine which ones can be declassified and which ones can be declassified with redactions. So he's really left the burden up to AG Barr. I think AG Barr has willingly taken on that task. Doesn't mean they'll all get declassified. Doesn't mean that there won't be redactions. And it doesn't mean that all of them are coming out and we're going to, start a paddy wagon tour of arresting people. It simply means that there is a document review with all agencies. And I would imagine the key agency would be the National Security Agency, NSA. And I would imagine it's the NSA who actually has documentary evidence of phone calls, numbers to and from, communications, emails, text messages, whatever they may be. I think that is what AG Barr is really wanting to get his hands on. And then to use those to put together the choreographed plot that took place. So I don't expect any of this to happen anytime soon because I think it's a Herculean task. Quite the unraveling and almost forensic analysis, if you will. Don't you agree?
I do. And I'm hoping that it'll come out in a very calculated drip, 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 like you and I have talked about for a few years now.
Correct.
That, using this as the in politics, timing is everything situation that we've been talking about for quite a while. I don't remember where I read or saw this over the weekend, but it did make a lot of sense to me, and I want to ping this off of you and get your thoughts. There was a discussion about how the members of the Democrat Party in the House of Representatives are going to try to stall this out or throw sand in the gears of this too with lawsuits. And I'm not aware that they can actually be successful or even hinder Barr doing any of this with lawsuits. Am I wrong with that?
No, I think that they'll throw as much sand in the gears as they possibly can.
Well, they always will, but there's nothing that they can do that can prevent Barr from doing what Trump has directed with regard to this declassification of documents, right?
I wouldn't speak in the absolute. I would tend to think you're right, but I would not speak in the absolute because we're always blindsided by something.
Yeah, circuit courts. Yeah. All right. Well, hey, I tell you, though, this is exciting. What do you think prompted Trump to make this move when he did?
Well, I don't. Well, he was always going to make it, but let's not forget that we had a couple of leaders from allied foreign governments that told him not to, and one of them was Britain.
Well, that's because Britain's knee deep in this, in my opinion. What do you think?
Well, parts of Britain are. I don't want to, not the whole country. And I wouldn't.
Well, the whole country doesn't have bad teeth, but the bottom line is a big chunk of the intelligence community and politicians in the UK have their fingers all over this, and I don't think they want that to be disclosed.
I would say former in this particular case.
Good move. And who are you eyeballing?
Well, we we have a couple of organizations in Britain that are private organizations that are, let's say, were launched years ago by former British intelligence that I would say John Brennan and CIA tapped on the shoulder. Now, there's probably more than one that was part of this, but right now it is there's one particular organization, I don't really know how to pronounce it, Hack-Hewlett Company Limited. And these are really essentially former spies.
Yeah, and it's big time upper echelon stuff.
And that's right.
Super spooks.
But we also, not beyond Britain, we have Australia and we have Italy.
Yep.
So there is a place called Link University, which is located in Italy, that both the FBI and CIA used for whatever reasons. They used it for training, they used it for sessions, they used it for seminars, conferences, whatever it is. So as a consequence, I think we are going to find that may be one of the core locations where the plotting, some of the plotting objectives took place. And that includes...
also, isn't it where one of the Papa D setups took place as well?
Yeah, I was going to say we have this Mifsud character, and we have Stephen Halper involved.
Correct.
I would also say that there's going to be more. Right now, those are two names that certainly come to mind, but there are more. I can't really put them all in on a whiteboard and make with the pins and the strings and connect them all yet. I mean, it's a Herculean. If I could do that, then we wouldn't need Devin Nunes.
Well, the timeline is going to be fascinating once you're able, and all other people that are trying to put this whole thing together, the pieces of this puzzle. Halpert, let's go back to him, because we talked about him either last week or the week before. Do you believe that Halpert is a Western agent?
I can't really speak to necessarily what his total resume or portfolio looks like, but I would say that Mifsud is.
And that's going to be enormous, don't you think?
I think so. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was Mifsud who actually had a farm/ranch in West Virginia too. In Virginia. Correct. So he's been a player. Halper, or it may have been Halper that had the farm. I forget which one. But it's important to understand that whichever one it is, I think it was Halper, to be honest with you. Kind of correct myself. Halper's father-in-law, I think his name is Ray Klein. And I believe that he was at one point employed by CIA. And I think that Halper kind of picked up the baton and carried on some of that work. So
yeah, and wasn't Halper and Mifsud both buddies and teachers at this kind of a spy school thing going on?
I don't know that Halper was. I know that Mifsud, he did some of that kind of work, but that most of the time that's undercover work. I mean, they're
connected. They are connected somehow.
I would say, but again, if I knew all the answers, then we wouldn't need A.G. Barr and Devin Nunes and Mueller and.
Yeah. Do you believe, and this is a question that I've been asking you now for about 6 years, do you believe we're going to see some recognizable faces and their heads actually roll?
No.
Why not? I'm getting sick of hearing that.
I know, but I mean, let's be real.
Come on, Brennan, you don't see Brennan and Clapper, Sally Yates. You don't see these kind of people going down for this?
No, honestly, I don't.
Why not?
Well, think of the things that if you worked for CIA or if you worked for FBI and you had to go down a kind of a shady, shadowy path to do certain things, you could always concoct a story that would necessarily be believable and rational for your activity, right?
Well, yeah, and Brennan
because both of those agencies work in a world where lies are common.
Right, and Brennan has been doing that, but I don't think Brennan's been asked the right kind of questions.
Well, I don't think any of them have. I don't think any. Now, we'll go back to the answer that I gave earlier when A.G. Barr will be tapping on the shoulder of NSA and perhaps DNI, where he can necessarily come up with some tangible evidence of where the plotters were plotting. And it wouldn't be circumstantial evidence, it would be actionable evidence. Now that would change things, but again, when you work in a world of intelligence, you work under clues or symptoms or educated guesses, and you go down these certain paths, and a lot of them may be dead ends. So then you back yourself out in reverse and go down another one. That's a very common thing. Look at what the Senate had to do in order to get through this whole accusation on Brett Kavanaugh by that woman Blasey Ford. Okay. They had to go down some cockamamie path to see if there was really anything there. And there wasn't. You see what I mean? So they were almost sent on a wild goose chase.
Yeah, but when you start throwing people into some of these interrogation rooms, like Mueller and his band of misfits has been doing for little over 2 years, and you start labeling them with, well, the word treason is starting to pop up here, Mr. Brennan, and we're not so much interested, Mr. Brennan, as to when you knew about the dossier, but rather when you knew about the information that Christopher Steele was discussing. Brennan can't lie about that. When you ask Brennan when he first saw the dossier, he can give you an answer, and it may not be a lie, but he's lying about when he knew about the information. And I think some of these lower level players, when they get sweated in an investigation, I don't see them having loyalty to Clapper and Comey and Brennan and Yates and the DNC and Hillary, unless they, of course, fear for their lives.
Well, until we have some other kind of barn burner here, we don't know necessarily what to think. We're all out here kind of doing rock, paper, scissors.
Well, yeah, but here's what we do know. There was a coup attempt against a sitting U.S. president. I don't think anybody, unless you're in the mainstream media or some left-wing mental patient, is going to deny that. The evidence that's come forth that you and I know about, just you and I know about, is overwhelming. And anytime you've got something like this going on, if the investigations are done properly, they're going to put people in the room, in the chair, with the white light above them, and they're going to get them to flip. You know they're going to get them to. And once they start flipping people, I'm just praying for the house of cards.
Well,
Coming down.
I learned this going all the way back to the O.J. Simpson trial, is always fret over who is not being talked about and what is not being talked about, because generally that will tell you where the real fire is. And what is particularly fascinating is the coup attempt was post-inauguration. The original plot took place during the campaign, prior to inauguration. Okay, so we have obviously a handful of names in there, but and we can go. We don't need to necessarily go through a list of those names, but who's not listed? Who's not being talked about? And I would argue that we haven't heard a word out of Obama. We haven't heard a word from Ben Rhodes or Susan Rice or John Podesta.
Yep.
So I would, on a Post-it note or on a legal pad, start, kind of listing all of these other names that we've come to know, but are not part of the current discussion. And my gut tells me that there's a reason for that, and they may soon be part of the discussion. Again,
let's hope they are. Let me ask you this. We got a little over a minute before we got to go to break. Let me ask you this. There was a term that you used 6 months to a year, maybe even longer. Is it presidential finding? Is that the term?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think any of these people are protected in the discussion that we're having right now about the subject that we're talking about through a presidential finding that Obama issued?
I don't believe he issued one.
Yeah, I was hoping I'd hear that. And he didn't issue one because he didn't think this would ever happen, right?
Well, clearly there was something going on at the White House, and clearly it wasn't enough, so they had to expand. There was a very tight circle in that White House, and then they had to expand it a little bit later on. So I'm going to use the word again of choreographed. We just don't know how wide and deep this thing is.
I agree with you. I agree with you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we got to take a quick break. You're listening to the Drive Time SITREP. My name is Don Neuen. I'm the co-host of Cowboy Logic Radio. You can catch the show that I have with Donna Padusha every Tuesday night on whatever radio station or internet station that you're listening to this show on. Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. Sometimes we're at 10 p.m. Eastern. Sometimes we're on the weekends in addition to that. In addition, on the other end of this conversation, you've got the stellar Denise Simon, an Intel Analyst that has her own show, the Denise Simon Experience. Again, same station that you're listening to this show on. Catch her show, the Denise Simon Experience, Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. We're going to take a quick break. We're coming back. You're listening to the Drive Time SITREP. Welcome back to the Drive Time SITREP, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Don Neuen. You've got on the other end of this situation report, the stellar Denise Simon. Denise is hunkered in her bunker in central Tampa, Florida, surrounded by multiple walls and fences for security. And she's probably got situated strategically throughout her humble abode, which is actually not that humble. I've been to it. It's really nice. She's probably got countless semi-automatic weapons.
Snipers.
Of different calibers. Yeah, you've got some snipers too, I've heard. All right. Now, I, on the other hand, am cascading down I-20 at a brisk, what appears to be 72 miles an hour, under the secure driving of a U.S. Marine, Denise. I know that you have an affinity toward Marines, given the fact that your dad, God rest his soul, is still a Marine in heaven, and you, because you're his daughter, you too are a Marine. I am secure in my travels, coming up on mile marker 160. Are we in Louisiana? We're in Louisiana. We're headed east. We've got clear skies with some beautiful white clouds, clear roads, and at the helm, again, is our Marine, Tom Butcher. Now, Tom, I don't know if they can hear you from where I'm at, but give us a little bit of a hoorah. Hoorah! Did you hear that today?
I did.
That's because he's a Marine and he can exude a hoorah at 110 decibels, regardless of what he's doing.
Semper Fi, brother.
She said, Semper Fi, brother. All right. So now, before we went to break, ladies and gentlemen, we were talking about this document dump and declassification. Hey, Denise, how unredacted are these going to be when Barr does this? I would assume that he's not going to disclose anything of a national security level. But do you think Barr is sitting around being worried about whether people's reputations are going to be tarnished, or whether, quite frankly, anybody could potentially go or not go to jail or be indicted?
I don't think Barr is the least bit concerned, and I don't think that the new Attorney General, where was he from? Rhode Island?
Yeah.
I don't...
The guy that looks like a mad scientist with his goatee?
I don't think he cares either.
He looks like a science teacher, but a creepy one.
I don't think he cares either.
I hope he creeps everybody out, because based on what you and I talked about either last week or the week before with regard, I can't remember what his name is. He's got a set of balls, and he's going to do the right thing based on what we can tell, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So
right,
where do
you want to go from here on this?
I don't think that he either of them really care, who gets caught up in this snare. And I'm fine with that. We don't hear the term anymore of draining the swamp. And I would say that we need to get back to that business at hand, because not only is draining the swamp inside government, but a lot of that swamp is outside government. And I hope that between John Durham and Bill Barr, the list,
Durham, yeah,
the list grows.
Well, and you and I will most certainly agree on this. I don't care if a Democrat goes down. I don't care if an independent goes down. I don't care if a Republican goes down. I don't care if a libertarian goes down. I most certainly hope that a socialist, a Marxist, and a communist will go down. But I don't care. If you've done something that I would get busted for, you should go down. Correct, Denise?
Absolutely.
It does not matter what colors you wear.
Indeed, that's right.
So what else? I'll give you an update of where I'm at, because we're still in Louisiana, right, Tom? Given the fact that we were at the 168 yardstick 10 minutes ago, I think it's safe to say, Denise, we have not left the state.
I would think so.
Unless the state's 169 miles wide. Oh, but we're headed east, so we're going smaller.
All right.
Okay.
Let's
But
turn
those
to.
updates are always fascinating, don't you
Yeah,
think?
they are. Thank you for that.
Merry Christmas to you, by the
You
way.
too. You too. Ho, ho, ho.
That's right.
All right, let's go to
All right,
Europe.
so what's next?
We're going to
You
Europe.
what?
We're going to
Okay.
Europe.
All right. The land of armpits that are unshaven.
With zero
Denise,
fanfare.
hold on. You shave your underarms, right?
Yeah.
Good. And your legs?
Yeah.
All right. Nothing more unsightly than a woman that doesn't do that.
Okay, good.
Don't you agree?
Glad,
Don't you agree, though?
glad you got that clarification out there.
But don't you agree with me?
I do.
Yeah, because if you didn't, you'd have thatch hanging out from under your arms, right?
Yeah, probably.
Pretty gross, don't you think?
Yeah.
All right, back to you, Denise.
With almost zero fanfare and news media, we had some interesting elections that happened in Europe in the last few days.
Can you say the word conservative?
Well, we have to be careful about some of this. But let's put it this way. We've got a handful of countries out there in the European Union that have decided that where their voters have decided that they're just a little fed up with some policies. And one of their policies is immigration. One of their policies is national security, and the other policy is spending. And probably the last one and the most significant one is deference to their judicial system, to a single bureaucratic court, otherwise known as the European Court. So we have we had a newly established what is known as a Brexit party, and Nigel Farage launched that party, and he took home 32% of the vote in Britain. Now that tells you that it was far and away more than any of the parties there. And that tells you that the Independence Party, the Labor Party, blah, 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 that they are losing their power and influence. So that is significant. Now, what Nigel Farage does with the Brexit Party going forward and where this Brexit movement goes, we have yet to know. We can probably, guess, but there's always something more. And of course, Theresa May did tender her resignation. I think she officially leaves office June the 7th. If I may be off a day or so. Spain, however, didn't quite go the way that we needed them to, because their Socialist Party still essentially prevailed. But because of the pressure from other neighboring countries, they could water down the Socialist Party somewhat in Spain. Then we have France. And, they're calling Marie Le Pen a far righter. I don't know that she is a far righter, but compared to Emmanuel Macron, she is a far righter. And she came away with 23.5% of the vote, far and away topping Emmanuel Macron. Then let's head on over to Italy, shall we? Because Italy's Deputy Prime Minister Salvini, he took 34% of the vote, and he is, as they like to call it in the media, a right-winger. We also have Viktor Orban, which is Hungary, which essentially did the same thing. They're calling him a far-right nationalist, but he scored a huge win. Okay. Now, what is particularly interesting is in these countries, they had more of a voter turnout than they've really ever had before. Now, what does that tell you? That tells you that citizens in Europe, based on the country they live in, are fed up. And watch for Greece, because Greece could be the next one where we have this Alexis Tsipras, that he could be out in a New York minute too, over a more conservative party called the New Democracy, because they won 33% of the vote over the prime minister's party. Now,
all right, let's go. Hold on 1 second. Let's go back at the beginning of this subject that you brought up. You mentioned borders. You mentioned overspending. You mentioned lack of national defense and national security. We need to remind the listeners, and again, we've got some of the brightest listeners on the planet, but this is everything that the left-wing mental patients in the United States are advocating for. And now you've got the Europeans that are saying, we're from the land of socialism, and we like all this, and we want free stuff, and we want guaranteed wages, and we want all this other stuff. But when it comes down to the stuff that really matters, the people of Europe are sick and damn tired of the same thing that people like you and me and Donna, who's in this bus, and Tom, who's in this bus, have been bitching and moaning about, which is national security, borders, and everything that you mentioned at the beginning of that topic discussion. Why is it that all of a sudden the Europeans are waking up when we've known all this all along?
Well, we can't know because we haven't traveled to Europe. I haven't been to Europe in 20 some years, but we can't know just how bad it is. One reason is because the existing leadership of those countries, especially Germany, has essentially sequestered media. So we can't really understand the chaos. Now, I interview a buddy of mine over in the UK often, and he has created an organization called UK Unity, and to try and get a handle on what was happening in the UK, Scotland, and Ireland leading up to Brexit, post-Brexit vote, the new Brexit vote, Theresa May, and where we go from here in their parliament. So you almost have to get rid of the BBC and go to the next level of people that are, on the ground and really speaking truth to power, which I really don't like that term, but nonetheless, in this case, it's accurate. Now, I would say we have an interesting task to those like MSNBC, CNN, and the rest of them to say, do you understand, especially to Hillary, to Bernie Sanders, Pete Buttigieg, and any of the rest of them, do you really understand the awakening of a sleeping giant here? Because if it's happening in Europe, it for sure is happening here. And I don't think they're out there. Our 20 some odd Democrat candidates running for president in 2020 are trying to sell us something else. And we're not totally buying it. And I'm not sure that either one, they recognize it, these candidates recognize it, or two, they're in fear for it. And because they're in fear of this little sleeping giant.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, sorry about that. I'm going to blame that on the Marine, Tom Butcher, who's at the helm, for driving me into a cellular dead zone. But we are back, right, Tom? All good? Let's have another hoorah. Hoorah! There you go. There's your hoorah. All right, Denise, try to pick up wherever you feel like you might have lost me.
Well, as I was speaking to the fact that we have these 20-plus candidates, over 24 Democrat candidates running for president in 2020, and I think that they are well aware of what is this movement that's happening in several countries in Europe, and the fact that the sleeping giant here in the United States is not buying the socialism that they're trying to sell us, including Medicare for all and, the Green New Deal and blah, 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 blah. They're ignoring it. I think they recognize it, and they're going to continue to try and sell it. So I would say it's our position to go to these candidates' social media feeds, even when they come into your city or town with these, cockamamie pressers and town halls that they're doing, and saying, hey, do you understand what the movement that's happening in allied countries? and list those. We list Brexit with the Brexit Party. We list Hungary. We talk about Italy and Greece. That we're fed up. They're fed up, and we're fed up. And why do
we tip our hand to that? Why don't we let them continue down this path of mental disease and implode?
Well, I don't mind tipping
just continuing to call them out for what they are.
I don't mind tipping the hand, because I'd like to say to a Kamala Harris, hey, don't you think it's time that you admit that your entire platform is wrong? Hello, Bernie Sanders and, all the rest of them. That it's wrong. Do you have any plans to retool your platform because of what is happening with the sleeping giant that's, standing on its feet and stretching? Because we're awake. And the voters in France are awake. The voters in Italy are awake. The voters in Britain are awake. In Hungary. And we're awake. So maybe, we ought to go after somebody like a Ted Cruz and say, can you please introduce some legislation that bans an entire socialism platform in the United States and put a shot across the bow? I mean, we have been given a bird's nest on the ground here with these election outcomes in these handful of countries in Europe, and I think that it's time that we exploit it.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so. What has Ted Cruz been doing lately? Do you know?
I was on a conference call with him the other night, and mostly the people that were asking him questions had to do with immigration and had to do with, the plot against Trump. So,
and what's he been doing, though?
Well, pretty much, I guess
Here's the thing. People are asking him questions. We really shouldn't have to ask somebody like Ted Cruz questions. He ought to be on the news telling us what we need to know.
Well, he is, in fact, out there. I mean, he's been on, I've seen him on Fox a couple of times.
All right. Well, I'm seeing Jim Jordan a hell of a lot more, and I'm seeing Mark Meadows a hell of a lot more, and Devin Nunes a hell of a lot more. Now, I get it that they're in the House, which is sinking rapidly, but, for you and me and Donna, Ted Cruz was who we voted for in the primaries.
Right.
And ever since, I haven't seen too much of Ted Cruz after I had to switch my loyalty to Donald Trump. I haven't seen much of Cruz.
No, I have. But, the other thing, too, is they're working pretty diligently on pieces of actionable missions that we can undertake when it comes to Venezuela and to Cuba. Discussing in committee.
Hey, do you think we're going to get Cuba? Do you think Pompeo's going to be successful in getting Cuba out of Venezuela?
Not entirely. If we can get Russia to talk Maduro into leaving, then Cuba will go. But we have to get Maduro.
That's what Pompeo's been doing.
Yeah, but we remember we are necessarily putting all the things in place, but the pressure was really on Cuba, the Organization for American States, and Russia. I mean, we're fighting we're not really fighting Maduro. We're fighting a mightier foe. And when it comes,
I get
that. Okay,
I get that. But 2 weeks ago, wasn't Pompeo over in Russia talking about? This was one of the many things that he was probably talking about, but it was at the top, had to be at the top of the list.
It was. It clearly was. And then what came in and infected that whole mission was Iran.
No, I got you. Hey, you still standing firm on your analysis of Iran? That I think it was 2 weeks ago that we talked about this.
What? That we're not going to go to war with them?
Right.
Correct. Yes.
Good.
However,
I have the same feeling.
However, I will tell you, we're putting Lebanon now as the monkey in the middle, because it appears that Hezbollah is not getting paid. They're on a big fundraising kick, and now we have threats to the natural gas pipelines / rigs that belong to Israel. And the waters where those natural gas operations are is in disputed waters. So it looks like Hezbollah has, we've picked up some intelligence that Hezbollah wants to go bomb them. So, and if they've got whatever is rumored to be 100,000 missiles parked in Lebanon, they certainly have the ordnance to do so. So, that is part and parcel, I think, why we have actually sent 1,500 additional forces into the Middle East, but we're not sending any other Navy assets.
What happened to the discussion a few weeks ago, or the headline a few weeks ago, where Trump was going to label the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization? What's happened to that?
Nothing.
Why not?
Good question. I believe that when Al-Sisi was here, about a month or so ago, he was asking Trump to do so. And I believe that Trump agreed to do so. So he kind of put out the working orders to let's kind of get this done. What that necessarily takes in order to seal that deal, I don't know. However, it could be complicated because now we've got some kind of a peace deal that is coming up regarding the Palestinians. And I think that's being held in Switzerland next week. And I believe that, they don't want to necessarily muddy the waters by listing the Muslim Brotherhood as a terror organization until that this presentation has been done when it comes with between Israel and the Palestinians and Hamas and the rest of them.
Gotcha. Let me ask you this, and I would assume I'm probably asking you to speculate on this, but what about all the members of Congress that are aligned and connected financially with the Muslim Brotherhood? What does that do to them if Trump is successful in labeling the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization?
Well, I imagine that something will pass through the Ninth Circuit Court again, or there'll be some other kind of injunction and some kind of this and that. So those that invite CARE into the halls of Congress often and regularly and perhaps even daily will necessarily be put on notice. But I would imagine you could end up with some kind of protest going on the lawns of on the Hill.
Oh, I'm sure. All right, let's see how much time we got, Denise. I'm showing 4 minutes. Where do you want to go from here?
Well, I think it'd be kind of cool to talk about a feel-good story, because I often get accused of feel-good stories that there aren't any. But there actually is a feel-good story, and it happened on a beach that I used to, as years ago, frequent almost every day of my life when I was in Sarasota. And it's a common practice and I've actually done it myself, where people get out their metal detectors and they walk up and down the beach, especially after a large weekend, and they start poking around to see what was left behind. Well, in Sarasota, a fella was doing his metal detectoring, if you will, and he came across what appears to be a necklace. And this necklace appears to have the remains, the ashes of a loved one in the little charm that's on it. And so there has been essentially a plea that has gone out by media with the picture of the necklace. So we have this delightful person who was doing some metal detecting on Siesta Key Beach that has found this necklace that has the ashes inside the charm from a loved one. And they have contacted media. They've gone on to social media, and they're working pretty diligently to find the owner of this necklace with a timeline, with a description, to help put the necklace back in the rightful owner's hands. Now, I would say that is a stellar thing to do. most people would just go, and either one, throw it away, or two, just kind of keep it for themselves. But somebody certainly does have a conscience and certainly does want to do the right thing. That does often happen with people that do metal detecting, especially when they find wedding rings and or class rings and those kinds of things. So there are good people out there, but this one is particularly close to me because it happened on Siesta Key Beach in Sarasota, and I used to live on Siesta Key Beach. So there's a feel-good story of which you accuse me from time to time, Mr. Don, of not having any good news.
True, but you do come through with them, and when you come through with them, they are feel-good stories. and I would like to say as kind of an addendum to that story you just told, people are good. People are good. Whether they're Americans, whether they're Europeans, whether they're from South America, Central America, Canada, Iran, Russia, China, people are good. The problem is when people become politicians. That's when they get bad.
Yes.
Don't you agree with me?
Yeah.
All right, Denise Simon, another stellar drive time SITREP. Ladies
Thank
and
you.
gentlemen, please go to Denise's website, founderscode.com. Founderscode.com. If you put your email address in the little window that invites you to do so, Denise will sell your data to every possible source. No, she won't. I'm kidding. She won't do that. What she will do is keep that email address secure, and you will start receiving all of her newsletters anytime she does one of her posts. And I'm going to make it quick, Denise, because we're running out of time. Ladies and gentlemen, what Denise does for you is all the hard work. She vets all of the information and material and sources that she's writing about so that when you read them, and then you turn around and talk about them or repost them, you can do this with confidence because she's done all the vetting for you. You don't have to do some of these boneheaded moves like sharing a post from 2012 that's completely irrelevant or has been debunked that you saw on your Facebook timeline. There's no need for that. Just go to founderscode.com and you can appear just like I do. You can appear to be so much more intelligent than you actually are. It worked for me. It's got to be able to work for you. All right? So, Denise, let's take it home, girl.
Thanks for listening, and God bless America.
Oh, wait a minute. Let's get a hoorah. One last hoorah. Hoorah. Got to do better than that. Hoorah. There you go. We're taking it home. See you later.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.